But I'm delighted to welcome on stage to introduce our next special guest, Mr. Chris Packham.
Good afternoon. The sun has come out. It's not true what they said about Derbyshire. We forgive them. Thank you very much for coming along today. We've had some great talks already, but now we need a cultural interlude. And I'm very pleased to say that we have I'm going to say we have the country's foremost folk star, singer, songwriter, and a man who has recently released his most successful album. And if you don't own it, I suggest that you put your fingers in your purses and wallets to purchase Sky Dancer, aptly named, of course. Martin Simpson writes from the heart, and in his heart is plenty of nature. The Sky Dancer album is not the first of his investigations in the way that nature affects us and our culture and our interest in our history. He's written many other songs about birds, plenty of those. A few months ago, he said to me, would I be able to provide him with a photograph for the cover of Sky Dancer? And I said, well, you're going to want a picture of a hen harrier then. And many years ago, I was fortunate to have hen harriers hunting in my garden. Yeah, sad. It wasn't in the UK, was it? I was living in France at that time, and the birds were much more common, and they were nesting in farm fields, and occasionally they would fly over the garden. Anyway, I took a really rubbish photograph, which is on the back of Martin's fabulous album. So forgive the photograph, but enjoy the music, and please put your hands together for the one and only Mr. Martin Simpson.
Thank you very much.
If only he wasn't so busy, I'd get him to do that all the time. I started writing this song on April the 11th, 2014. I know, I was there. And I was walking along the beach at Slapton Sands in Devon. And Slapton is an incredibly beautiful place with a very, very dark history. And I was walking along, there's a causeway, and then there's the shingle beach, and there's a thing called Slapton Lee, which is a nature reserve. And I was thinking about the history of the place, but in my left ear, there was the constant sound of Chetty's warblers singing, which was very nice. It was helping. But I was still feeling the history of the place, and I walked a little bit further, and the first swallow of spring flew over my head. So I wrote this. April sun on Slapton Lee, between the lagoon and the haunted sea, I was thinking of war and cruelty, when spring's first swallow split the sky, and I was lifted above all care, as the swallow swung through the salted air, come from savannah and desert and sea, to mark another year for me. sailor's tattoo like a prayer on my arm to bring me home and safe from harm. Though rocks may melt and seas may burn, dark, swift and bright swallow shall always return. Bright swallow, sweet spirit of stockyard and barn, you lighten our days with all of your charms. Bring hope to the sailor upon the wide sea and mark another year for me. Swift scythe and scream through the city dusk, late to come and first to leave, but come they do and leave they must. Hot August nights their absence grieve, and how we miss their impudent glee. This devil's bitch, this mystery, this sprite that sleeps upon the breeze and flies and feeds behind the storm. April sun on Slapton Lee, between the lagoon and the haunted sea, I was thinking of war and cruelty when spring's first swallow split the sky, and I was lifted above all care as the swallow swung through the salted air, come from savannah and desert and sea to mark another year for me. And for you, my love, and eternity. Thank you very much. I was sitting in the car on the way here thinking of what I was going to sing you. And I wanted to sing you this. I wrote this having read an article, I think in RSPB magazine or possibly BBC Nature magazine, which just makes me want to talk about the importance of the people who write about this. They write about what we care about so we can become better involved. And I think that's really important. And I was reading a piece about pheasant shooting. And I grew up in North Lincolnshire. There's an awful lot of pheasants in North Lincolnshire and an awful lot of pheasant shooting. And of course, there wouldn't be that many pheasants if it wasn't for pheasant shooting. And at the time that I wrote this song, it was estimated that there were about 30 million captive bred pheasants and partridges released in this country every year, which is a ridiculous biomass. You know, it's just insane. Now, apparently, it's a lot more than that because, of course, our late lamented government, what we laughingly referred to as a government over the last 14 years, do you remember when they got into power, they talked about levelling up? And one of the first things that they did was they looked at people who own shooting estates and they said, good heavens, these people get £32 per annum per hectare for the upkeep of their shooting estates. We can't have that kind of thing. Let's level them up to £65 per annum per hectare. Now, that's obscenity, really, isn't it? That's taking the piss on a very grand scale. So I wrote this song, and it's called Toy Soldiers. I can't remember how I played it. At the time I recorded it, it was with some friends of mine, so I'll just sing it to you. The Romans built this road I'm on, straight and true, and brought for sport these jeweled birds like scattered beads all along the verge, all smashed by cars. Inside the wood the jay she flies, fine forester of worth, and carries acorns far and wide to bury in the earth. Dusty pink and grey and white, blue-spangled livery. The keeper blasts her from the air and nails her to a tree. The gibbet is a cruel show, gamekeeper's Calvary. Eyeless sockets, rotting corpses, rotting needlessly. Stoat and weasel, crow and buzzard hanging in the air. Judged, condemned and murdered for the crime of being there. All along the ride, the corn grows high, rank nettles choke the earth. Rusted wire, splintered cages mark the place of birth of 30 million toy soldiers, raised just to die, raised to be broken the moment they fly. I dreamed I saw them thrown in their thousands, bloody the river as she flows by. The Romans built this road I'm on, straight and true, straight and true, and brought for sport these jeweled birds like scattered beads along the verge, all smashed by cars. Toy soldiers. Thank you very much. Well, the song Dark Swift and Bright Swallow that I started with, that was, it came to the attention of a gentleman who was then producing the Spring Watch and Winter Watch programs. And he got in touch with me and he asked me if I would like to go and sing it on the Winter Watch program, which was being filmed in the Cairngorms. This was Winter Watch. It was in January. And I got on the train from Sheffield, and the further north I got, the less likely it looked that I was going to actually make it to the Cairngorms, because the snow kept coming down and one of the tracks had already lost its electricity. And so anyway, I eventually got there, and I was picked up and driven to the site of the recording of Winter Watch, which was the Duke of Argyll's estate. And there were quite a few surprises in the Duke of Argyll's estate. I recorded the song, and it was towards the end of the day's program. So we all met up in the bar, and the bar was in the barn of the Duke of Argyll's estate. And it hadn't really occurred to me till I actually went to the barn what the Duke of Argyll and his friends liked to do in their spare time. But it was the first time I'd met Chris Packham, and we were standing in the bar of this place. Beautiful, beautiful timber building, very tall, and every available bit of ceiling and wall was decorated with stags' heads. So we were standing there with a pint in our hand going, isn't nature lovely? It was really kind of shocking, actually. But it was a total treat to work with those guys and to meet Chris, of course. And a couple of years later, maybe 3 years later, he asked me to write a song about hen harriers. Now, when I'm asked to write a song about nature, it takes me a very, very short time to get excited about it. But Chris Packham asking me to write this song, I got a little bit more excited about it. Unfortunately, I already had the first line of the chorus of the song, the first half of the first line of the chorus of the song. I live in Sheffield, and my next door neighbour, who basically lives at the bottom of my garden, is called Richard Hawley. Now, living at the bottom of my garden makes him sound a bit like a hedgehog, which he can be. He can be prickly, let me tell you, at times. But Richard and I like to talk about guitars, and we like to hang out, and sometimes we drink too much. And this particular evening, we were sitting on the deck at the back of my house, which is on the top of a hill above his house. And we'd been talking about guitars and playing guitars and drinking wine. And all of a sudden, it was beginning to get dark, and there was some spectacular little bit of avian activity. Nothing unusual, just beautiful. And Richard, who's an incredibly creative human being, he turned to me and he went, "The bird completes the skyline." And I looked at him and I said, "Richard, you absolute bastard." And he said, "No, it's okay. You can have it." So I already had that in my book, and I'd had it in the book for a couple of years. So the first verse of this song, the first thing I did, I got in my car and I drove up to Ringing Low, which is just a bit above where I live in High Stores. And Ringing Low is a grouse moor, which means that it's spectacularly lacking in some species which should be there. But what I did was I took my phone and I took a picture of a piece of ground in front of me, and I wrote about what was there and what wasn't there. The second verse talks about the difference that we can make. If we put our minds to it, we can make such a massive difference. In 1975, I did a gig at Lampeter University in mid-Wales, and I drove there. I was living in the Lake District at the time. I drove there in my little Mini, and it had snowed a lot in January in mid-Wales, but they ploughed it all up by the sides of the road, and I came around a bend in the road, and over the snowbank in front of me was a red kite, and I literally almost crashed the car. It was so beautiful. I'll never forget seeing that bird for the first time. At that point, there were probably about 40 pairs. I was talking to Mark Avery, who said he went to mid-Wales 3 times around about that time to try and see kites and didn't see any. Now we know what we can do if we reintroduce a bird and concentrate. It also talks about peregrine falcons. And if you live in Sheffield, one of the worst things that can happen to you is that you might get a pigeon dropped on your head by a peregrine falcon nesting on St. Andrew's Church. I like that. It'd be a good way to go, wouldn't it, actually? The third verse talks about moorland burning. I drove back into Sheffield from on tour last October, and it was a beautiful autumn day, but the higher up High Stores Hill I climbed, the worse the visibility got. It was appalling. It was absolutely appalling. When I opened the car door, I realized that it was smoke that I was seeing, and I walked round to the back of my house, and you could see that these characters had set fire to the moorland in order to encourage the growth of heather to feed the grouse. But it's, you know, it's an obscenity. Isn't it an obscenity? Yes, it is. So this is called Sky Dancers. Bright bedstraw constellations shine among the budding heather and ling, and the jade green berry bushes, the oak eggers are on the wing. The stone chats and the pipits fly in spring lapwings and curlews cry, but there is something missing, there are no dancers in the sky. And the bird completes the skyline, that is clear to see. An empty sky's a heartbreak, so what is it to be? The pale ash grey sky dancer, or this wasteful cruelty? At 15 I saw the falcon fly at Simmons' yacht on the River Wye. Scarce and unexpected then, red treasure in the sky. In mid-Wales 50 years ago, the red kite's beauty lit the snow. Now I might see them every day, falcon on the city cliffs, red kite by the motorway. And the bird completes the skyline, that is clear to see. An empty sky's a heartbreak, so what is it to be? The pearly ring-tailed harrier or the shooting gallery? And the heathland, it is burning up above the valley towns. The greedy flame consumes the peat, so when the rain comes down, it pours across the moorland's wreck, bursts the banks of stream and beck, overwhelms the stream and beck, and floods the town again. And the bird completes the skyline, that is clear to see. An empty sky's a heartbreak, so what is it to be? This life-supporting landscape, or this brutal tyranny? And the bird completes the skyline, that is clear to see. An empty sky's a heartbreak, so what is it to be? The pale ash grey sky dancer or this shooting gallery? Thank you very much. Thank you. I got into nature and into music as well, both of those things, because of my father. And this is kind of my greatest hit, this next song, and it talks about my father. My father was born in 1899, and when I say that, it just always seems a bit more less likely, you know. How could that be? Yeah, he did. Yeah. So he would have been 125 years old on February the 23rd of this year. He didn't quite make it, unfortunately, but he had a pretty damn good innings. He fought in the First World War. Then he went back to his home in Bridlington and stayed there. When the Second War kicked off, he volunteered for that and saw service in the Second World War. He didn't marry until he was 52 years old. He had me when he was 54, and I have a daughter who is 19, who is going to university to study conservation in September, which makes me very happy. And she was born 106 years after her grandfather. That's good generational separation. I think you'll agree. If we all did that, there'd be less of us about. Nature could probably do better. This is called Never Any Good. Well, you were never any good with money. Couldn't even hold a job. Not steady enough for the office. Not hard enough for the hard. You would rather be riding your Norton or going fishing with your split cane rod. You were never any good with money. Couldn't even hold a job. when your grammar school days were over. It was 1917, and you did the right and proper thing. You were just 18. You were never mentioned in dispatches. You never mentioned what you did or saw. You were just another keen young man in the mud and stink of war. You were never any good with money. Couldn't even hold a job. Not steady enough for the office. Not hard enough for the hard. You'd rather be singing the Pirate King or fishing with your split cane rod. You were never any good with money. Couldn't even hold a job. And you came home from the Great War with the pips of a captain's rank and a German officer's Luger and no money in the bank. Your family sent you down the coal mine to learn to be captain there, but you didn't stand it very long. Well, you needed the light and the air. You were never any good with money. Couldn't even hold a job. Not steady enough for the office. Not hard enough for the hard. You'd rather be watching the fulmars fly or fishing with your split cane rod. You were never any good with money. Couldn't even hold a job. When the Second War came along, you knew what should be done. You would re-enlist to teach young men the booby trap and the gun, and they sent you home to Yorkshire with a crew and a Lewis gun, so you could save your seaside town from the bombers of the Hun. You were never any good with money. Couldn't even hold a job. Not steady enough for the office. Not hard enough for the hard. You'd rather be finding the nightjar's nest or fishing with your split cane rod. You were never any good with money. Couldn't even hold a job. When my mother came to your door with a baby in her arms and a big hurt boy just 9 years old, trying to keep her from harm. If you had been a practical man, you would have been forewarned. You would have seen that it never would work, and I would have never been born. Well, there's no proper work in your seaside town, so we moved here looking for a job. You were storeman at the power station just before I came along, and nobody talked about how you quit. But I know that's what you did. My mother said you were a selfish man, and I was your selfish kid. You were never any good with money. Couldn't even hold a job. Not steady enough for the office. Not hard enough for the hard, and your Norton, it was soon gone, along with your split cane rod. You were never any good with money. Couldn't even hold a job. You showed me eye bright in the hedgerow, Speedwell and Traveller's Joy. You showed me how to use my eyes when I was just a boy, and you taught me how to love a song and all you knew of nature's ways. These are the greatest gifts I've ever known, and I use them every day. You were never any good with money. Couldn't even hold a job. Not steady enough for the office, maybe not hard enough for the hard. You'd rather be riding your Norton or going fishing with your split cane rod. You were never any good with money. You couldn't even hold a job. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think I've got time for another one for you. This is This is a song that I wrote. I wrote it driving from Trowbridge in Wiltshire to Hatfield House in Hertfordshire in a rental van, which was quite tall, so I had a great view. And it was a beautiful summer day. I was driving from one festival to another festival. And I was driving up the A361. You can tell I do this for a living, driving, can't you really? So I'm driving up the A361, and it does that a lot. And in the south of England, one of those is called a down, which I find slightly confusing, I have to say. So I was walloping along this dead straight road, and I got to the top of a down, as it were, and out of the van window, I could see a red kite and a buzzard. And they were both riding the same thermal, and they were both clearly having a wonderful time. And of course, you know, I have to admit I was not sticking to the speed limit, and I am very, very good at high-speed bird watching. So this was 70 miles an hour, and then I was down the other side of the hill. But it started to make me think. And I got a bit further up the road, and the A361 meets the A4 at Avebury. So right in front of you is the Avebury Ring, this massive stone circle. And then you turn onto the A4, and there's the East and West Kennet Long Barrows and Silbury Hill, which is, well, what is it? It's a monument. And for hundreds of years, people have dug it up going, there must be something in here. But there isn't anything in it. It's a monument to people's abilities to build monuments, I think. You know, imagine these guys with deer antlers going, what are we going to do this afternoon, Egbert? Well, I've got a great idea. Why don't we move all that soil from over there and build a fucking great big mound like that by the side of the A4 so that people in 3,000 years' time will go, what do you reckon's in that then? It's really kind of, it's an odd thing. So just further along there is a track, a Neolithic trackway, which is called the Ridgeway. And it just kind of comes down to all these marks of human existence. And I wanted to write about it, but I wanted to write about it from the point of view of the land. And so I'll finish this with this song, which is called Ridgeway, and it's written from the point of view of the land. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you all very, very much indeed for caring about this. We really need to care about this stuff, so it's lovely. And I'm very glad that, the sun came out for a second there. That cost me a lot, let me tell you. The sun warms my bones and the lazy air rises, lifts red kite and buzzard in effortless spirals. I have missed the kite, the whistling gleaner, just as I miss the wolf and the bear. And I remember, oh, I remember before you were there. Woke up from my long sleep, I shivered from my cold dreams, made myself a warm coat, a coat of richest green, a coat of oak and ash and elm and beech and lime and alder, all the trees of England and the finest ever seen. He worshipped in his rings of stone, he dug and clawed his hills of soil, cut my coat with my own bones, turned to metal in his fires. His children, they wonder at his toil, I find little to admire. First he cut for shelter, then he cut to clear for cattle, then he cut for the smelter, and he always cut to burn. He cut the oak for battleships, black poplar for his rifles. He cut and kept on cutting, as if he'd never learned. The sheep graze, my coat is gone. There's a path along my bare back. Feet have worn away my skin to make the ridgeway track. The sun warms my bones and the lazy air rises, lifts red kite and buzzard in effortless spirals. I have missed the kite, the whistling gleaner, just as I missed the wolf and the bear. And I remember, oh, I remember before you were there. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.